Hello, class, and welcome to Chapter 10. Chapters 8 and 9, we kind of talked about, developing employees and how do we keep employees motivated? How do we keep them feeling like they're part of the organization and really, trying to make them have a career with our organization and really, make that a great long-term relationship. Well, Chapter 10, we're going to kind of talk about maybe kind of the downside of all that, which is employee separation. This is probably, for me, the hardest part of my job, but it's also the part of the job that I spend the most time doing because of how critical it is. As much as we try to do for our employees to keep them motivated, to keep them excited, to train them, develop them, make them a long-term employee, sometimes for whatever reason it doesn't work out. This chapter talks about kind of two types of separation, voluntary and involuntary. Let's start with involuntary. So what happens when an employee can't get along with their coworkers or has a bad attitude or really, just can't do the job? They're a good person, but they just, they make too many mistakes. They just can't seem to make the job work. Most companies and most organizations will have what is called progressive discipline, and your book does a great job of talking about what progressive discipline is. Instead of just an employee kind of messing up one time and then, oh, sorry, you're done. You got this spreadsheet wrong, so we're going to fire you. Most companies don't do that. Most companies try to give you several chances. So they have what we call a progressive discipline system, which gives you kind of several chances to improve upon. So I'll use the one, and your book talks about a very similar one, but I'll use the one here at Oklahoma State. So here's our progressive discipline policy. So the first time something happens, we call it first step, where the manager will sit down with the employee, talk through the issue. It is a written document, and it will go in the employee's file. But it shows them, here's the issue, here's how you can correct it, and here's how we're going to monitor to make sure that you're trying to correct it. So that's a first step. And let's say things continue and they're not improving, or they're maybe even getting worse, then we go to a second step. Second step is kind of it's basically the same thing as a first step with a little bit more urgency to say, look, hey, we've talked about this already once. This is the second time we've had to talk about it, and things aren't improving. Either your attitude's not improving or the amount of errors that you're making is not improving. So then at a second step, it's a further commitment from the manager to say, look, what do you need from me? How can I help you improve? Or you need to stop doing these types of things so that you don't continue to get in trouble, essentially. So we do go through those first two steps, and if those don't work, then we go to finally what's kind of called a third step, which we call a decision-making assignment. And what we do is we have the employee write out a statement that says, I am committed to my job. Here are the things that I'm going to commit to make sure I continue to work on. So if the person has a bad attitude, they have to write out why, what can they do to improve upon it. If they are making too many errors or they're just not understanding their job, they need to write out what they're not understanding further and what additional things the manager can do to help them out. So it's kind of, I jokingly kind of call it a written contract between the manager and the employee on what we agree to so that it's going to continue to get better. And there's a strong sense of urgency at a kind of a third or final step, because if it doesn't improve upon that, the next step is termination. So our fourth step is, of course, termination or separation from the company, where we just say, look, we've given you so many chances. We've tried and tried. We've done different things, and it's just not working out. It's just not the right person for this job, and we end up terminating their employment. So sometimes, a lot of times employees will be like, you know what, I get it. It's not working out for me either. I probably need to go to a different job, or the other extreme is I've had employees, get very violent or even, throw a chair. I've even seen that in my career. So everybody reacts to terminations differently. But as much as it's the least favorite part of my job, and it's not something that most managers or any manager for that matter enjoys. It is a part of reality, and it is something, even if you never work in HR, if you go into a manager role, at some point you may have to involuntarily terminate somebody from their employment. So it's important to understand the concepts the book discusses with that. The other half of Chapter 10 talks a lot about voluntary separation. So an employee comes to you and says, hey, I'm voluntarily quitting. I'm leaving your organization. And it's done for a couple of reasons. If somebody, is a retirement age and is just ready to retire, obviously that makes total sense. They've been in the working world for 30, 40 years, wherever, and they're just ready to move on. So In a case like that, it makes total sense. But other times, and what I really want to make sure you understand about this chapter is what happens when an employee says, hey, look, I'm leaving to go to another company because I'm not happy with your organization. I don't feel like I'm valued. I don't feel like this is the right fit for me. This other company is more in line with my needs, or maybe they pay better, or I can get a better title. So what we need to focus on then is if people are voluntarily leaving our organization, we need to understand why. Why are they leaving? Do we not pay enough? Do we not value our employees enough? Are we making the job too difficult, or is it too easy, for example? So this is a great opportunity for us to internally look to determine why individuals are voluntarily leaving us, so that we can improve upon it for future employees and current employees to do that. In my role, anytime somebody voluntarily leaves the organization, we do an exit interview with them to try to, and we ask these questions. We try to get as much feedback as we can so we can improve our process and understand why employees are leaving. And when you're in higher education, pay is always a big thing. We have amazing benefits and a great retirement system in working in higher education, but sometimes our pay may not be as high as a Fortune 500 company. So that's something that I hear a lot is maybe we don't pay as well. So in certain positions, maybe we need to pay more or try to make it more enticing for people to stay. So again, this chapter does a really good job of talking about the two different types of separation from that perspective, either voluntary or involuntary. So those are the main points that I want you to take away from this chapter. So, and again, we'll incorporate this in the message board as well as this week's assignment. So again, very important topic, and I hope you learned something. So until next time, thanks again, everyone.